Okay, this is Senate Institutions. Today is Tuesday, April 21st, 2026. And this is the third segment of our meeting, which will be focused on stormwater utility language that has been added to the bill, which is Capital Bill H 952. And we have two or possibly three folks who are here to testify. First one, Neil Kamen, Commissioner, Department of Environmental Conservation. I knew it was a C. And do you know all of that? We can introduce ourselves.
Sure.
Okay, so Wendy Harrison.
Okay.
You know.
And Rob Plunkett, Bennington Senate District, so I know about this.
Sure. Excellent. More than me. It's a water problem. I know about water.
Oh yeah.
Yes,
Sure.
you do.
Water in the wrong place.
Senator Joe Major Windsor.
Senator Russell Essex.
Good day, so nice to see you again.
Joe Benson from Orange.
Good day, sir. Thank you. For the record, Neil Cowan, I'm Deputy Commissioner, Department of Environmental Conservation.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here.
You bet.
And so there's some language that's proposed, and you're here to discuss that.
Sure. What I'd like to do is contextualize it a little bit for you members, because I know you and I have spoken, and just sort of provide just a basic statement of position on it, and then see if there's any specific questions that folks would like to ask. So just, I'm also joined by my good colleague, Gianna Petito. I'll give you an idea of what she does in just a moment, but Gianna is the Deputy Director of the Water Investment Division in DEC. Is helping me with a pretty substantial project right now. So for context as to why this language is landing in your capital bill adjustment this year. Last year, the General Assembly passed Act 37, 2025, and the intent of Act 37 was to establish a group of people, including the state, that would go forward and review the water quality requirements established by EPA's TMDLs associated with the 3-acre stormwater permit. So folks may remember that under the TMDL was established a program that requires that any owner of a parcel that has 3 or more acres of impervious surface that's undertreated, that is not treated to modern standards, is required to bring that property up to modern stormwater control standards. And there's a lot in there. And I'm not going to get into any of that. I don't want to, the purpose for us being here today isn't sort of like Stormwater 101. But rather it's a little bit about funding. So it's an expensive proposition to bring all these properties into compliance. Course numbers around $260 million.
We like to ask questions.
I'm sorry, I know it's not Stormwater 101, but can you give Cliff Notes Reader's Digest version of 1 minute stormwater?
Oh, absolutely, Senator.
Thank you.
My pleasure. If you look behind
And just because it's not just us, but it is constituents at home.
absolutely,
Okay.
100%. I'll just take the example, literally, if you look behind you, you would see a wall, and underneath the wall is the drive that goes up and through underneath the mezzanine, right? So that's pavement underneath there, and pavement is an expression of impervious surface. An impervious surface is land surface that rain does not soak into. So the more impervious surface there is, the more water sheets off of it. This creates water quality problems when unmanaged. And when managed is perfectly manageable and does not create water quality problems. So many jurisdictions, lots of states over time had developed in such a way to essentially manage stormwater by getting it off the road, getting it off the driveway, get it off the roof, get it out, get it into receiving waters, streams, wetlands, lakes. Now, by doing that, we accelerate the flow of water that's falling in the form of rain or snow melt, and that takes with it stuff that's on the ground, like dirt, pollutants, bird poop, all those things that pile up, brake dust, tire dust.
Calico.
Sure.
Every now and then.
In any case, so stormwater, when I refer to stormwater generally, it is essentially the practices associated with keeping the water from creating pollution when it runs off land. Mr. DePietro, who's with you, is an expert in this. He can tell you lots more details than me.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes. So because the requirement to manage those 3 acre properties is expensive. And we've been struggling with, how to equitably assign funding for that. This came up as a very bright discussion in General Assembly last year. General Assembly elected through the various committees to establish a study committee that looked at a regional approach to managing stormwater. So a lot of municipalities around the country and a few municipalities in Vermont have what's called stormwater utilities. And what they're essentially mechanisms to collect funding from owners of impervious surface within their jurisdiction, pool those dollars and use them to manage stormwater. And the manner that the 3 acre permit program is structured now is if you own the 3 acre property, the requirement is on you to go through the permitting process, identify an appropriate fix, and then implement the fix. And that can be costly. Many other water quality requirements in the state are shared by multiple people in the state. But the 3 acre stormwater is known as a residually designated pollution source. And it is sort of it follows the polluter pays model. It's on the owner of the surface to pay for that. So that's creating challenges. It's expensive. As such, I am leading, I shouldn't say I. Ms. Petito here is incredibly ably leading a stormwater regional utility study committee to look at whether we should establish regional utilities. Now, that committee is in mid-process. We do not have recommendations yet. We're straw polling next month on what sort of the models are that we're going to push forward to full development for our report. The language in front of you here, creation of a regional stormwater utility under statute or rules of the agency shall not prevent a municipality from regulating stormwater, including adoption by the municipality of a bylaw establishing a municipal stormwater utility. It's essentially under current law, a municipality can create a stormwater utility. They can bill residents inside of the geography of the utility based on the area of the impervious that they own that's mapped. And then they pull those dollars and use them to help with stormwater management and roads or building municipal stormwater infrastructure. This language is essentially intended to make sure that whatever our committee comes up with and whatever ultimately passes through as law, the municipality retains the ability to create a municipal stormwater utility. And that's essentially what the language is intending to do. DEC, we feel it may be premature, but we also don't feel that it cuts out any opportunities available to us. And it's also revisitable. So if the committee has a significant concern that whatever our committee comes up with will preclude a municipality from being able to do a stormwater utility, this language would guard against that. So DEC will maintain a neutral position on it. And that's that. Would you like me to speak to the funding as well? Or you want me to stick with this, right?
I think you already talked about funding, and my intent and my concern has been that the regional utility could be structured to reduce the funding ability of the towns. That's been my.
Understood. I have heard you say that in the committee, yes.
And it can be a very valuable component to a municipality, and the uses that municipalities typically have for this revenue are much more than 3 acre issues.
No,
So and municipalities have been taking care of stormwater. Colchester's website is great. They have a website about stormwater, and they say they've been taking care of stormwater since 1753, I think it is. Basically, since they became a town, because taking care of ditches and flooding is a basic responsibility of a town. And I do not see how a regional stormwater utility would be able to or should take over those responsibilities. So my concern is that a regional utility could take the funding, but not the responsibility. And that's, and so I want to have a clear statement that that should not happen in this process, because I have been going to the meetings, listening to the testimony, and something that I don't know if I've talked to this committee yet about is that all of the utilities, all of the towns that have these utilities that have been asked, would you keep it? They say yes. I don't see any towns that are willing to get rid of these utilities because they are valuable. They're difficult to enact, but they are valuable. I don't know if that answers your question. I mean, you're asking
More-
about if you want to talk about the funding.
Oh,
but,
okay, yeah. I was just offering to be available for questions. But
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Since you brought it up, $100,000,
Yeah.
what would it be used for?
The intent of the funding, as I understand it, is to be used as front-end money to help a municipality that doesn't have a utility do some of the work necessary to build the utility. And that's why I brought Gianna along with me, because the Clean Water budget and the Clean Water Board, the Clean Water Fund has mechanisms to fund that type of work, and the Clean Water Board has a newly restarted mechanism to fund that as well. So to the degree that there's one thing I would offer is to the degree that there's an additional $100,000 that may be available, it might be valuable to consider whether that should be administered coincident with any dollars that Agency of Administration uses to help municipalities that already have stormwater utilities. So that's to say, keep the same granting entity for all sort of stormwater utility related work. But I haven't spoken to them about this, so
Okay,
mostly because this just came up yesterday. So,
so I'll just add to that. Is the way the mechanism works now is it's a reimbursement rather than money to start something. And the biggest hurdle for municipalities is getting it started. So that's why it's a very small amount. It's actually only maybe 2 or 3 would be able to be funded, but it is a start.
for context, the current law allows $25,000 per year per utility for up to 5 years.
Right.
That's what it's supposed to be, right?
Right, that's the Clean Water Board's policy. For the record, Jana Petito, Deputy Director, Water Investment Division. Would you like me to speak a
Should
little?
I ask Jennifer?
Yeah,
right now?
and if you could, yes, please. So you have come up and where you just did identify yourself. If you could talk about how expensive it is or it has been for the existing utilities, that would be very helpful, because I don't know those numbers.
I would wager that Mr. DePietro could speak more to that,
Okay.
the costs on the ground. But I can speak to a little bit of the history of the Clean Water Board supporting stormwater utilities. That really came out of Act at 2016. There's an Act, numbers 158, where we were as a state really trying to promote the formation of stormwater utilities, and said, let's create this funding to make it available because we have all of these obligations, and how are we going to raise for that? And so that created a priority for the Clean Water Board to fund stormwater utilities. And that's what launched, initially funded by the Agency of Transportation, moved over to the Agency of Administration, this $25,000 per year for 5 years for utilities that are established. In the preceding years, then we had Act 76 of 2019, where the state said, hey, let's find a long-term funding source for all of our clean water obligations at the state level. We've got this sort of statewide revenue source coming in now. And the act also sort of removed utilities as a priority for payment for the board. So since 2019, the board has sort of said, okay, well, let's just wrap up these payments. We've made this commitment for 5 years. Let's finish it up for the established utilities that exist. And then came Act 37 of 2025, just this last year, which re-elevated the payment of stormwater utilities and put it into what's called the Municipal Stormwater Implementation Program, which is a second tier priority for the board. It's helpful. I have a visual of the budget. Figured it out for you all. The board basically interprets that small, but like there's a first priority, second priority tiered, third priority, and then other, which is what the budget kind of continued on after Act 76 2019. So then we moved it up under this municipal stormwater implementation. So the budgeting that's in front of in the appropriations bill of the state fiscal year 27 that the Clean Water Board recommended does have a line for this at $125,000. And from the board's perspective, the need for the eligible entities is sufficiently funded with that budget. It's to go to Shelburne. It's the sort of last outstanding utility that the board was aware of the time that's sort of eligible and has established revenue raising mechanism. We're aware of one more now, Essex Junction. So when the state fiscal year 28 budget is going to come into effect, we'll be building in and providing funding for that utility as well. The board has set a policy. It's in the policy documentation that they sort of retroactively pay this after the utility is established. One of the concerns was to guard against utilities can be quite complex to set up and certainly relies on local will. And so there was some concern protecting the fund against sort of putting a lot of investment where there may not be a utility that ultimately gets founded and established. So the board has set this policy that says we will provide some funding. It'll be $25,000 a year for 5 years, but it's once you have established it and gotten some of that revenue raising on your own feet. So I think that.
Yeah, I guess one difference, let's let Tom, are you ready? Something we can talk about after Tom or before Tom or is the status of the original stormwater utilities, because they were in an EPA situation. And so the ones that I'm interested in are to establish stormwater utilities before there's a compliance issue. I think that's really important. I think we shouldn't only be reactive, and maybe I'm not saying it correctly, but let's let Tom. So if you could, thank you very much for being here, and if you could just identify yourself, please, for the record.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name's Tom DePietro. I'm a Director of Public Works for South Burlington. I've been Public Works Director for 4 years. In May, it'll be, I think. But 16 years before that, kind of managed our stormwater utility and some other programs. And before that, I worked with Neil and some of our longer tenured coworkers and colleagues at DEC in the stormwater section. So, Senator Herson, was there a specific question you want me to answer? Or I was going to start with like a stormwater utility 101, since Neil kind of covered the stormwater 101, but I'm happy to start wherever you like and just answer questions. Or
I think a stormwater utility is helpful, please.
yeah, sure.
Yeah. 101.
And I guess as I get into this, I'll note, so South Burlington has, we have the first utility in the state of Vermont, one of the first in the region. But a couple of years ago, we worked with the neighboring town of Shelburne to help them start the utility. So I had gone to Shelburne Select Board meetings, some of my coworkers, and really helped them talk to the community about it and start their utility. So we have both sort of the old and kind of the more recent experiences for starting stormwater utilities. And I guess I would say at its core, a stormwater utility is simply a mechanism to raise funds to address stormwater issues. It can be just kind of permit requirement related, capital construction, whether it's stormwater treatment practices or funds for culvert replacement or other drainage improvements, certainly for ongoing maintenance. And the fees collected by utility are strictly for stormwater. So, if a municipality starts a utility, they can't take those fees and use them for police cars or paving or whatever the other municipal needs might be, right? There's kind of a brick wall there. They're set aside for just stormwater uses. One of the things to consider in the community is if you're going to start a utility, why are you going to do that? Why not just pay for stormwater requirements out of your line item for culverts or sort of from the general fund, right? And so the whole basis of the utility and the fee is that it is not a tax. When implemented correctly, they function more like your drinking water meter. So, right, everyone's familiar with their water bill. You use so much water, you pay per gallon. There's no meter for stormwater, but the meter we use is impervious surface on the property, right? So we all know, as you explained, impervious surfaces generate more stormwater, right? So properties pay kind of based on the stormwater they generate. Most municipalities use an ERU, or equivalent residential unit system. So, and that's for administrative purposes. You don't want to measure kind of minor amounts on individual single-family home properties. So you do sort of a flat rate for individual single-family homes. And then commercial properties pay like, 1, 2, 3 ERU. I don't want to get into the details too much, but it sort of simplifies the process, but folks still pay more based on the fact they generate more stormwater. The real reason that folks point to why the utility fee system is preferred than just keeping it on the taxes is tax exempt properties. So if you were just to pay for your culvert or your drainage work out of your municipal line item, you may find there's a lot of, or stormwater requirements in general, whatever they may be, right, for municipal roads permit, let's say. You may find that in your town, you have tax exempt properties that have a certain amount of land use, but have more or an outsized amount of impervious surface. So I went and I pulled some numbers quickly for this example. So for Shelburne, a few years ago, tax exempt properties were just 19% of the land area, but accounted for 32% of the impervious surface in town. Back in 2000, early 2000s, we did this for South Burlington. It was a little closer, so it was like 22% of the land area, but those tax exempt properties had about 29% of the impervious surface. So when you switch over to the utility fee model, kind of everybody who is generating the stormwater sort of pays into it. Those properties aren't sort of outside the cost sharing. So it's seen as a more equitable approach, or kind of a more all-in approach to dealing with the stormwater requirements in a town. And I guess I'll stop there for a moment before I talk about sort of municipal stormwater costs. If there's any questions about utilities or utility development.
Any questions? And then just a comment is there's also a built-in incentive for those larger properties to reduce their stormwater fee by reducing their impervious, which I think that's the benefit. Did you?
Just by disclosure, I did a couple of stormwater projects for Tom a number of years ago.
Okay, great. And you know them? Okay.
Yeah.
So
But yeah, there's certainly credits that are available, and we have different types of credits. The most common one is a credit for providing treatment, as Senator Harrison pointed out. Yeah. So I guess I'll keep going then.
yes, please.
Yeah, so municipal costs for stormwater, they can be significant. On the infrastructure side, just replacing a large culvert can be tens, hundreds, millions of dollars. In 2021, South Burlington worked with Williston to replace a culvert on Muddy Brook. And that project is over $2.7 million. I mean, it's a good sized culvert in this case, right? It required a sizable increase to meet sort of modern sizing standards. That was a big bill. But even smaller culverts can be tens of thousands of dollars just to replace, something on a back road. I'd also note that all Vermont municipalities have to comply with municipal roads general permit now. So that's got a lot of things to do with kind of drainage on back roads, dirt roads. And then there's MS4 communities are kind of a whole different animal here in Chittenden County, where we have the federally mandated MS4 permit that's now run through the state of Vermont. But that comes with its own requirements, these 6 minimum measures for education, outreach, maintenance, et cetera. And then that's not to say anything related to the kind of Lake Champlain phosphorus TMDL costs, stormwater TMDLs. Neil started to talk about the 3-acre permit. Those affect both public and private property. But once you start to add all that up, municipalities, certainly in the Chittenden County area, but I think around the state, having talked to some of my colleagues, are finding a real need for more funding for this infrastructure and these programs. I guess I'll pause there again if there's any questions about sort of municipal costs or utility startup costs or whatever before I talk about kind of regionalization.
Any questions? No? Okay. There will be a test.
I know I'm talking fast. That's why I'm trying to.
No, it's good. It's good. Thank you. Now keep going.
Yeah, so in Vermont, all of our stormwater utilities are kind of municipally bound right now. We don't have a regional entity, but there are examples of regional utilities across the nation. And as Neil said, I'd be a little repetitive here, but the state's currently undertaking a process to consider some form of regional or statewide utility. That process and that discussion is really just beginning, is my understanding. And it's sort of the role for this new entity, this regional entity, I'll call it, is not really yet defined. So it does make it a little bit difficult to comment on proposed legislation. But I kind of had some overarching thoughts on it, I guess I would say. So as I mentioned, these utility fees are critical to many municipalities and our ability to meet our stormwater obligations. I mean, without these, if South Burlington didn't have this utility system, and the funding we needed to meet our obligations would then fall back to sort of the tax rolls, there'd be a significant increase in taxes in the city. And so now, again, we're spreading it across all property, tax exempt and regular property. So it's just, they're very important for a municipality like South Burlington, but I'm sure for others as well. I would say that legislators should be very careful not to do anything that impedes the municipality's ability to create a regional utility or charge fees. So I think the language, kind of the amendment, is sort of the opposite of that. It ensures it, which I think is important. And also it says to regulate stormwater locally. I think that's also important because there's a lot of local issues that may be important that a town might want to regulate through their land development regulations. I know when I started, we had a certain culvert in town that was undersized. So we had an overlay district, for example, that required additional work for any property within that. So that's just an example, I guess, of regulation where I wouldn't want that to go away. I'm not sure if that was the intent of the language, but you know, there's always sort of local issues that need to be addressed sometimes. I think it's also important too to understand what a regional entity would do. So again, I think the state's having that conversation now, but I think it's important to understand what it wants to achieve before we start discussing fees. Because it could be very different things. Kind of talking about fees before we know a program puts the cart before the horse a little bit. And you know, it's sort of the reason when folks are developing utilities, the reason a lot of those efforts fail across the nation is because they fail to make the case why it's necessary. So if we spend too much time talking about fees up front, it really serves to make the case why this is important, whether it's for the state or for the region or the municipality, whatever scale. Kind of you want to start there and get folks on board with understanding why. And then the only other comment I would have is to advice I guess I would give for folks on the state committee is to think carefully about the fee structure and referring to something as a stormwater utility. You really don't want to muddy the waters with this tax versus a utility fee concept. It could really undermine the whole idea of a stormwater utility, and not just for those of us that have them already, but for those of us that may want them in the future. So to really think critically about that and kind of go back to the 101 piece of this where I started. And there's a lot more to that we could talk about in the future, perhaps. But really just to be careful that whatever is set up is not viewed as a tax or set up as a tax and then called a utility. Because that could be problematic for a variety of reasons. And lastly, we don't want to set something up that would discourage or disincentivize municipalities from looking into kind of their own utilities. It would be my hope that whatever the state comes up with, they sort of bake into it the idea that there's going to be municipal scale utilities. And so that's not something that has to be addressed after the fact. So whether somebody wants to start one in the near future or many municipalities already have them, we're sort of worked into this system. And so that it's easier for the public to understand. I wouldn't want a situation where the public starts to think, well, I'm already paying that state fee. Why should I pay it at the local level too? When really it could be very different services, right? A state program might not do maintenance at all. You know, a state program, I couldn't imagine went on a Vector truck and a street sweeper. And even if it did, it wouldn't be able to get around the state. So local municipalities are still going to have those maintenance costs. And one last thing I'll say, and then I'll open up for questions. So this isn't our first time having this discussion. So in the mid 2010s, we talked about a statewide utility, and then Treasurer Beth Pierce put together a really good report. And I would encourage folks that are interested in this topic to read that. It will provide some answers to questions you might have, or at least some really good background information. I know we've come away or moved forward a little bit in some of the data issues of like a regional or statewide utility. At that point, there were some parcel database issues that needed to be addressed. And I think the state has done some of that. But a lot of what's in there is very thoughtful and kind of maybe may shortcut some of the conversations that are going on now. So that was all the things I wanted to touch upon in my little bullet list here. So thank you.
That is very helpful. Appreciate it. Other questions?
Can I answer
Okay.
that?
Sure.
So a lot of what Tom was speaking to is really helpful to put a point on that, and is a lot of what the Regional Stormwater Utility Study Committee is talking about as well. So certainly agree with a lot of those components about what are the services being provided at the regional level, and before we talk about the revenue raising. So really appreciate Tom drawing a finer point on that. And to draw to the language here in the capital bill, reiterating what Deputy Commissioner was mentioning, I think the department is pretty neutral on this. If this gets put into statute, we'll certainly use that as the study committee for guardrails and informative as well. And specifically the $100,000 of capital money, as Deputy Commissioner was suggesting, the Agency of Administration is delivering those funds right now on the Clean Water Fund side. They might be a better recipient, but it'd be worth talking to them. The piece about providing upfront funding, maybe Madam Chair, you spoke about the existing utilities and their regulatory obligations. Any utility that's formed in the state is eligible to access the funds from the Clean Water Board. It doesn't have to be driven by a regulatory charge, even though, like Tom mentioned, there is municipal roads general permit that all municipalities are facing and would like to cover. But given the small amount of dollars, the different flavor of dollars from the capital bill, some of our attention is really focused on what's going to come out of the study committee and what does that mean for how the state incentivizes and invests in utilities. And so there's some hesitation in forming sort of a new incentive structure, upfront payment in the interim, given that there might be some big changes coming in a year or so. And so what we've been trying to do is make clearer to municipalities how they can tell the board, hey, we formed, we'd like to get money. How do we access that? So we're trying to prime time that for next budget cycle. Hey, this is how you let us know that you've established that we can put you into the budget. But in terms of an advanced payment or thing to help people form ahead of time, something that we'd love to see what's recommended in the utility structure first to see like how is the state being directed to incentivize that formation as well. Does that make sense?
Somewhat, yes. I appreciate that you're neutral on the language, which I think is very important. And I think it does provide a guardrail. So I don't need to keep talking about that if the committee is fine with it. As far as the funding goes, I just can't imagine a situation where a town would come to you and say, guess what, we've done a stormwater utility. It's so much more complicated and more challenging than that. And the funding could be used, for example, to have a sample ordinance. I mean, that's something that would really help towns out. And I've been talking about that for a while, but haven't gotten that passed. But just a sample ordinance to help towns start these. I mean, I really don't think a town's gonna do this without your knowledge, because it's just critical, you know, to work with you. So I do advocate to continue to have the $100,000 because it's a very minimal amount, but it could be very consequential to towns who want to start this process. That's my opinion on it.
And I agree with you. I think upfront funding could be very consequential for these towns. And it might be difficult to roll out that availability of money on the time frame. I think before guidance or policy shifts, it's maybe what I'm trying to articulate.
Right. So
certainly of value.
So there might be, so we'll talk about the policy. Today was our big push to get the cash part of our budget done, which we did. So we do still have some time to work on policy. So if you have any suggestions on how the 100,000 should be monitored or used, I don't have a lot of time, like two more days. But if you can get that to us, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, just a question. You say that committee's studying this. What's the time frame? What do you see as time frame for them to come up with their plan and then, kind of setting what the objectives are and then what you actually need for funding to move that program forward?
The report is due next January. So as Deputy Commissioner was speaking to, we're at the point now where we have a couple of different models and we're taking some straw polls about which model we're really going to lean into and drafting some content for the report. What is the regional entity services? How do they engage with municipal stormwater utilities, et cetera? If there's language coming out of next legislative session, it would inform, I would imagine it would inform some of the board and budget tiering and how they either more heavily invest in regional or municipal or both utilities within tier 1 and municipal tier 2, the municipal stormwater implementation program line. So I'm imagining that language is likely to come out next legislative session, and then the board will take it up in the fall as they're building their budget for fiscal year 29 at that point.
Got it. Thank you.
And since we're talking about language, how the act that you're working under, it specifically says regional utilities. Is there any appetite to talk about like to regional entities such as utilities? Because I really do think a regional entity could be very helpful, both in policy, regulation, revenue for sure. But a regional utility is where I get both alarmed for the municipalities and concerned for the liability.
That's a really great question, Madam Chair. And I think that might be some of what Tom was speaking to and being very specific on the language.
Yes.
When you say utility, we're talking about the revenue raising component, but also I think the study committee's been thinking a bit more flexibly about that. And some of the scenarios are imagining a regional entity that works in partnership with the municipality for the revenue raising opportunity. So maybe the municipality has a stormwater utility in existence and is partnering with the regional entity, keeping some fees in-house, passing some on to the regional entity for the set suite of services that are distributed, performed either by the municipality or not. That's one model. But there's, I guess, to say that that's not, the study committee is not strictly just looking at revenue raising at the regional scale. They're also asking, like, should we do more state level revenue raising? And what does that mean in terms of required to make funding?
Right. And the scenario where the town utility would pass on revenue, the one that I noticed the most said that the town would have the town would keep its administrative fees. So that's the kind of thing that really worries me, because the towns need actionable fees. There's things that they need to do. And so that's why the revenue is just so important to stay at the town. But I think I've hit that horse. No, I'm not really hitting horses. You know that. So is there anything else anyone has to say? But I do appreciate this conversation. It's been really helpful. Thank you, Tom, for being here. Thank you, Janet, for being here.
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thanks. All right. So we will go to the next topic. Thank you for being here. So it's the Little River State Park lease. We're a little bit late. Oh, did you need something?
I apologize in that I kicked the water bottle under the bench.
Oh, no.
Trying to get
It's
it out.
drinking water, not stormwater. Thank you.
So that's the intent for us to proceed.
No, that's okay. Okay, so this again is H 952 capital bill, and there was some language about this lease, and I just have a number of questions about it, and other folks might have questions. But if you could just start and introduce yourself and give us a general idea of what the goal is of that language.
Absolutely. For the record, my name is Rebecca Washburn. I'm the Director of Lands Administration and Recreation for the Forest Parks and Recreation Department. I also serve as the chair of the VORAC Steering Committee, the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative.
Great organization.
Yeah, thank you. So the reason why I'm here today, many of you know that our department's statutory authority to convey interests in land requires that we come to the General Assembly for approval first before we go ahead with making that conveyance. That typically takes the form of ski lease amendments or land exchanges, some of the kinds of things that you may have seen me come in for in the past several years. This is a little different today. We've been working on a project. If anyone has visited Little River State Park and been on the history hike, you know, you encounter this unbelievably old, decrepit looking building, fondly call it the Goodell House. The Goodell House has been there since the 1860s. It was one of the buildings that we took on through eminent domain when we were taking over those lands for flood protection. And it's the only building that didn't actually end up getting removed. And we've been looking for a use for this building for a long time and trying to preserve the historic integrity of the building. Enter Vermont Huts and Trails. They have an interest and a mission associated with advancing these kinds of lodging opportunities around outdoor recreation, particularly providing accessible recreational opportunities. When we began working more closely with this entity, we recognized an opportunity here and began having conversations with them about what it would look like to restore the building and provide this new and enhanced use within Little River State Park. Only recently through that process have we learned that a lease is really the best way for us to address the funding constraints that VT HUD secured through congressionally designated spending award that they received through housing and urban development. So this is a HUD grant that VT HUD's received. Based on that, the needs of the partner, the investment they're making, and our needs and our ability to retain some of our authority as landowner really led us down this path of thinking that a lease was going to be the right tool for this particular relationship with VT HUDs. Unfortunately, that realization really came kind of out of sync with the legislative session and our opportunity to capitalize on coming in, having a really lovely baked lease agreement for you all to contemplate and ask questions about. Instead, the suggestion was come in with a lot of the sort of ingredients baked based on this more sort of durable understanding of the way our ski leases operate and try and build on that and get the latitude for us to enter into this lease within the next fiscal year before the next legislative session starts. And this is really because every spring we go up and visit this building and worry that it's going to have fallen down. We have the roof tarped and there's a real fear that we're going to lose the structure if we don't do something about it. So we're coming with the session law language, which is in your capital bill, requesting approval to move ahead with entering into a lease based on the provisions that are outlined in the current draft. And I'm more than happy to go into the details. However, I know, Chair Harrison, that you have a series of questions, and I have daycare pickup today that is non-negotiable because I'm solo parenting this week. So I just want to be able to get to as many questions and information as possible in the time that we have available.
Okay, do you have more information than this than you can tell us? Because I'll just run through so it's structure at the top on page 18. That structure is the Goodell House.
The Goodell House.
Goodell House.
Mm-hmm.
So 20 years, 2 plus 2, 10 years, so 40-year lease fee. But this to me is a list of the items that would be in a lease, but not the items themselves. So
Exactly.
I feel like it's a blank check to just approve it this way.
I think the idea here is based on the fact that we have 7 ski area leases. They have components within them that do what we have decided is the right balance of providing authority to an outside partner or business while retaining the sort of rights and authority and mission related objectives that we want to be able to achieve. The idea is if we put those building blocks in this language. We're creating the signboards that give this committee the confidence that we can enter into a lease that wouldn't deviate from the sort of spirit and intent of being able to partner with outside entities to advance our mission. So it's true, it does not include all of the content, simply because we haven't negotiated all of that content with the partner. That work is underway. It just is happening a little bit out of sequence with the ability to have brought a really fully baked draft lease, which is what we would have done otherwise.
Okay, so can you provide the ski leases to us, please?
Yes.
And then is there something you can do on a temporary basis?
We,
Secure it and then come back with the lease next session?
if we don't have a lease in place, the partner isn't able to meet their grant objectives through the HUD grant and wouldn't be able to do the work. So we need the lease in order to begin the work to both reconstruct the structure and begin the work of considering the operations. So it's a kind of like a sequencing problem that we're faced with, and this was a proposed solution to the sequencing.
So when will you have the lease for them?
We're expecting to be able to complete developing this lease and negotiating it by basically this time next year. We're in conversations with them now, walking through the components that are in the language, essentially agreeing on the term, what the fee will be, how we want to accommodate access for management purposes and access for users. What are the ownership rights and approval rights that we want to make sure the lease addresses, termination clauses, which is also another common component of a lease, operations and maintenance details, integration with our state park system and state park operations is also an important consideration that we've been exploring with VT HUD's, conflict resolution, and then obviously insurance and indemnification associated with the Agency of Administration's requirements. So these are all the components of the lease that we're in conversations with the partner on right now, but don't have specific language drafted.
But did I hear you say that it would be this time next year that it would be finalized?
Yes,
So
if
why?
we were able to get approval to move ahead with authority to enter into that lease.
Well, I don't see why we can't give you authority to negotiate the lease and then you come back next year. And we approve the lease.
What's the language is saying in fiscal year 27, which starts. Mhm.
I'm having trouble following the timing as well, because in one sense, you're telling us the building's in danger of
Yeah.
basically collapsing if somebody doesn't get right onto it.
Mhm.
And you're saying that the HUD funding is tied to having the lease. And
Yes.
they need that in order to secure the funding.
Mhm.
And then you're telling us that we're not gonna have an actual lease agreement until January of next year. So I'm just trying to put the pieces together. And I'm going, so it means you're not doing any repairs on this building until not this summer, but next summer.
If we are able to begin working on finalizing the lease when this language would come out of the legislature, we would be finishing the lease and getting the work done. We would begin the reconstruction work this field season. So the language gives us through fiscal year 2027, which would be, I feel like we're already at
The language,
26.
just to clarify, the language that in this bill would give enough assurance for them to move forward with the HUD funding, because I'm assuming you need the HUD funding in order to do the repairs on the
Mhm.
building, but not the actual lease agreement.
The lease agreement has to precede our ability to do the work, as you pointed out. Our goal is to get the lease agreement in place during this field season so that we can finish the permitting process and be in place.
That's different than what you just told us of January of next year.
I think what it says in the language is that we would have until about this time next year based on the language saying that we have through fiscal year 27 end to complete the lease. Our intent is to have the lease completed long before that.
Yeah, that's different.
I think you can have, we could,
Well, I think you should try it. I'm just having trouble with not having parameters.
I think if you want to suggest more parameters, I think that would help. I think if we want to make modifications to the fiscal year 27 timeframe, if you'd want to tighten that up, we can tighten that up. I think those are suggestions that I would offer the committee for contemplation.
Well, just a couple of questions, just to keep on that sort of the timing.
Mhm.
The HUD funding, is there a deadline for applying for that? The HUD funding, so in other words, what is that timing? That is critical in order to get the money to actually do the repair on the building. And so if we did not prove you moving forward with this language, without actually see a lease agreement, I want to understand how does that impact or put in jeopardy the HUD funding, and then how does that affect the actual building? Because when we talk about a lease not being in place until January of next year, that tells me it's not that urgent.
I think I misled you in saying that the lease wouldn't be in place by this time next year. My intent was to convey that the language in this current draft suggests that that's the window of time to complete the lease. Our intent is to have the lease done as soon as possible following this legislative session, if we were to get approval to enter into the lease outside the legislative session, because it's the critical domino that will allow BT HUDs to access the HUD funding. They have a grant in place. It's effective through 2031 or 2031, and would be available for reimbursement to do the work on the Goodell
So
House.
HUD grant is already in place.
Wait, when we say, are you saying HUD or HUDs? Because the organization is HUDs.
Yes, Vermont HUDs is the organization. They received a grant through the Congressionally Designated Spending Program, and it went through Housing and Urban Development.
Okay, so we are doing HUD and HUDs.
Yes.
Got it. We have a really good real estate professional in our midst. And sometimes there are temporary agreements that are made, assuming a final agreement, and it seems like this would be a perfect example for that.
Senator Eagles?
I don't think they're wrong with what you're trying to do. I think we're splitting hairs with a lot of the questions, but that's me where I'm at. I understand what you're trying to do. I get it. And, so, yeah, fine.
So I have a question. Is there an appraised value for the property and estimate what the cost of renovation?
The total grant going to BT HUDs is for 3.8 million, and they expect more than $1 million of that to be dedicated just to the restoration of this structure. So that's the valuation that we're working with. Some assessment has been done in coordination with historic preservation to better understand how to approach the reconstruction. One of the reasons why we are coming to the committee late in the session is because we were attempting to negotiate with other tools. We thought that we might be able to accomplish this with a license and a contract to cover the relationship during the reconstruction phase. And it wasn't standing up to the rigors of what HUD was requiring from a sort of like a site control commitment for the funding and was falling short of what the VT Huts board was feeling comfortable based on the investment work they were making. So we did some work to try and find something that would allow us to move ahead. And at the end of the day, the lease arrangement seemed to be the one that was the most appropriate. And I think anything else with a level of durability that would address those two entities that we're working with would have us back here asking for support from this committee because we cannot convey actual interests in land or our own assets without the approval of the assembly.
Right, and I think that approval is required because the citizen legislature should make a decision on whether or not this is good for the state. And this is just so vague. I mean, there's so many. I mean, we don't know the amount, right? That there would be, and I appreciate that they're going to improve the structure. That's not even for sure on this. 40-year term, is it necessary to be a 40-year term? I mean, that's it. We don't have any information about the association, and it could be. I mean, I expect they're very good people, and I appreciate that they want to approve the building, but this, we just need information. I just need information. I mean, I don't know if my colleagues do, but I mean, you can send us stuff. I don't know if there's any backup that you've provided.
No, but I mean, I guess, as I understand it, building is in disrepair.
It is.
And if it's not dealt with soon, may be lost.
Mhm.
You have an entity that is interested and has the funding
Mhm.
to actually do the repair. And what's their intent on using the building? What do they want to use it for?
Mhm.
When would they be moving in? And right now, the building is gaining us zero income. And once it's leased, it will be providing income.
Correct.
So, have you talked at all about what that potential lease rate might be and when they're actually going to occupy the structure?
I think the plan to occupy and begin operating largely depends on our ability to get the reconstruction started, which, part of that process is being here today. They have other huts that they operate throughout the state, so they have some sense of the occupancy rate that they could expect, and they see this as likely being a pretty desirable location, which would suggest that based on the rates that they're charging at other huts, they are thinking that they'll be able to bring in between $25,000 and $35,000 a year. Based on what they've designed for the hut, they're thinking 10 to 12% occupancy. So we have some idea of what that looks like based on the history of managing other facilities in the similar fashion. And yet we haven't gone through the process of actually nailing down what proportion of that, would be going back to the state as revenue based on the arrangement. So that is something that we haven't worked out yet. I think from the point of view of does this bring public benefit based on the way that we think about how to advance our mission to promote outdoor recreation and support natural resource protections? We recently went through a planning process for outdoor recreation, and access in particular really rose to the top of being an important consideration. I think one of the components of what VT Huts brings to the table and thinking about how to complete this project is that they're creating accessible experiences for residents and visitors. So we actually do see this based on the tremendous amount of input that we received during that recreation planning process. We see that validating the idea of investing this funding. We also know that while we've been searching for a funding source for this for years, we've not been successful in securing the funds required to do this. And VT Huts has that and is willing to lead the construction phase. So we see in a lot of ways that this is bringing quite a bit of public benefit from the point of view that they will not have to be spending state public dollars to restore this building in the way that if we were to work through BT Huts, we're both bringing in some revenue, restoring a historic structure, providing recreational opportunity that doesn't currently exist in this part of the state in this way. And not doing that by spending state public dollars. So our analysis came to the conclusion that this was a good idea and worth bringing to this committee. But certainly, if you have specific suggestions of ways that we can sharpen that in the language, or if there's something that we can do to sort of further pursue this option, happy to.
That question.
Okay.
The 40-year
Mhm.
on the lease period, where did that come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. So HUD has a minimum, HUD being the funder, has a minimum of 20 years. And we were looking at the way the ski leases have been structured. Some of them are much longer. The older they are, typically the longer they have been, but our more recent ski leases have been a longer duration with those 10-year increments to give us the opportunity to sort of lean back in and say, do we want to make any tweaks here? Is there anything we want to do to change? So we felt like we wanted to introduce that cadence of having the opportunity to review once that 20-year commitment that we knew that the funder would require was up. So it was a little bit of a compromise approaching the term.
Take back my statement, I got one.
Okay.
Maintenance and upkeep of the facility, will that apply with HUD for the 40-year period?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great question.
Yeah, and the way you're explaining it to us at this meeting is very helpful and it sounds great. But, and it would just be really helpful to have documentation and an explanation, about this. So if you can provide that and the ski leases too, because it's interesting that you're using them as a model.
Sure. I can follow up and prepare the ski leases, and if there are other material that I can provide at this stage that would help.
Well, I mean,
Sure.
the HUD's grant,
The
right?
grant.
So you have that. And so that wasn't easy to get. So I'm sure I would expect that you would have it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And just some information on the Vermont Huts and the revenue. You talked about the revenue. So just that documentation would be really helpful.
Okay.
Okay. Do we get you, are you okay for the
I am.
pickup?
We even have time to spare.
Okay. I don't know. I think I have a meeting at 4. I think we have a meeting at 4, so separate meeting.
And I can provide supplemental information to your committee assistant. Is that how you
Yes,
prefer? Or do
yes.
you want me to make arrangements to come back in?
Only if you want to, but
Okay.
but yes, you can send the materials. And as soon as you can send them, that would be
Indeed.
best. Okay. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, do we have anything else? I don't have anything else for today.
You're gonna hand us out, Scott.
I can't be.
Okay.
Good afternoon. To the record, Scott Boardman, Crystal Arlett. I made new sheets.
We have 3 more changes.
Take it up with my boss.
Thank you.
As long as they're bonded, we can take them all.
Sorry.
What I've done here is I did take Senator Engel's suggestion of removing the $500,000. Then bonded, report correction, and I moved it to 250, go to the store. And then remove the 250 in cash from the store back up to Newport.
And so the orange that has no,
Yes, because
That's
originally
the
they had
change.
500,000. And now the change is, that's at 0.
because now it's in the cash.
That's correct. So the dollar amount doesn't change, just the fund was going to change.
Okay.
Otherwise, nothing's changed since we last talked. One thing we haven't gone through top to bottom to show all the changes that we've made bonded in cash.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that they did vote the bill out in appropriations about an hour ago, so our cash is good to go. They're happy there.
Okay.
And so if we want to make any more changes, we can make changes in the bonding. But
Okay.
otherwise, we can go through, I know you all have had a long afternoon. We can go through top to bottom tomorrow or next day, whatever you would like. Then so you have this, you take a look at it. There you go.
Good. I think the spreadsheet will be fine. I mean, I think we've all agreed on the spreadsheet. Just the issues that we'll still have are on the link.
Yeah.
Um,
But, I know you have a meeting, you said.
Yeah.
And stuff.
yeah.
We've made 11 changes altogether, and we can go through those in 5 minutes next time.
Okay. And we're meeting tomorrow. And and this is the only thing on our agenda, I think.
Your agenda says, I think.
So mark up possible votes.
Tomorrow, but also on Thursday, yes, John, and. So I'm not sure if, Thursday should also have possible votes.
Yeah, we actually had possible vote on Thursday. I was optimistic. Maybe we'll just put it on both.
That way it's, if you run out of time tomorrow, you have Thursday.
Now I'm not as optimistic about the language.
Yeah.
After the last,
Uh,
witness, that's, okay. Okay. Great. Does anyone have any comments on stormwater utilities? Just so we can put that to bed. Are we good? Okay. Great. So now, for me anyway, it's this, the lease is. I believe, only outstanding.
Great.
Okay.